Can you imagine taking a single piece of 12 by 12 pattern paper and turning that into a whole bunch of individual pieces of art? It all starts with a masterboard. But what is that? Why are they useful? Why should you consider using one in your art? That's what I'm talking about in today's video. I'm also going to show you how I strategize to get the most out of a masterboard and how I go about collaging one. When you sit down to create something, you want to be productive. You want to make good use of the time that you have and to complete something. In my case, I love creating small art. I like postcards. I like creating ATCs, which are artist trade cards. They look something like this. And I also make small art like ink box cards that are 3 inches by 3 inches. All right, so how does this work? Imagine that you have a 12 by 12 piece of pattern paper. Use either side, it doesn't really matter. I like the white side, but no big deal, whatever you want to do. Now, decorate it in some fashion with paint or with collage so that you have a background that you use as the foundation for your other pieces of art. Say I want to create a bunch of projects from a single masterboard. With my postcards, I have them at 4 by 6 inches. From a 12 by 12 masterboard, I can use half for 3 postcards at 4 inches by 6 inches. If I want to create some ink box cards, I can do 4 of those ink box cards at 3 inches by 3 inches in a quarter of the masterboard. And for my last quarter, I could have 4 more ATCs. All right, so I'm sure you've got the idea. So let me show you how I create a masterboard using collage papers. Here. It's a 12 by 12 paper pad, and you probably have one of these as well. It's a lot of pages, and maybe there's a lot of designs that you are not interested in using. So I've pulled one out and I've turned it over where I've got a blank side. So I've drawn some outlines of pieces that I want to end up with. I want to have 3 postcards, and I want to have some ink box cards, which are 3 by 3. Those are going to be that size. And then I want to use this space for some ATCs. So I will have 4 of these as well. So for my ink box cards, I will go ahead and mark my lines. Now, it's not necessary at all to do this. You can skip this step if you want to, but the reason why I'm doing it is because I want to know where those border lines are. I want to know in the back of my mind, I want to keep it in mind where I'm going to be cutting. So that is why I am drawing these lines. For the ATCs, I am going to put them, kind of just trace them. And they were just ordinary playing cards before. So I already know that these fit perfectly in this space. So I'm just going to roughly trace them out so that later on I can cut out my ATCs pretty correctly. There we go. Okay, for the ink box cards, the length and the width are exactly the same. And so when I place down papers, I'm going to have the orientation all in the same direction. So for example, if I have this and I have this, I know that they are pretty much in this up-down position. Now for the ATCs, I can see that I may need to pay attention to how I put my papers down. Maybe, maybe not. Most of the time when I create ATCs, it tends to be in this portrait orientation rather than landscape. So if I'm putting down papers, maybe I want to kind of pay attention to that and say, hey, remind myself that I need to be putting papers this way. Or what I can do is I can kind of do a combination of the both. but just keeping in mind that eventually when I cut this out, this is the orientation of the ATC. So it's just a matter of preference, what I want, but having that extra bit of knowledge of where the cut is going to be just kind of gives me a little bit of an edge as far as being able to plan just the tiniest bit with how it's going to turn out once it's cut out. So that's what these marks are for. They are for knowing roughly where I want to place papers. So now I can start looking for papers. I've got my boxes, a ton of papers in these boxes, and I can start to figure out what I want to put in the background. Now, a lot of my vintage papers, even looking at it from here, I can see that they are kind of the same color in the respect that there are these neutrals with black text on them. I have book pages, again, neutral with black text. That tends to be the majority of the papers that I have, and that's perfectly fine. That's exactly what I'm looking for when I am starting to layer the first papers into this masterboard. When I am looking for papers, I can look for things that contrast just the tiniest bit. So I've got stuff that is kind of a little bit on the whiter side of paper, and then I have some pieces that are very much darker. So that kind of makes things interesting. And then I have a lot of stuff in between. So that's all I'm going to be trying to do when I am looking for papers. Now I have my lines. So the fun thing to do with these lines is that when you're looking for papers, I always like to start where these intersections are, and I see if I can take papers and kind of straddle those lines. So if I put this right here, it's going to be in this postcard and this postcard and this ATC and this ATC. This ATC is the orientation is the other way. So when I go to add a next piece of paper, I can put it like this if I want to, right? So that's all I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to go ahead and fill up my whole page from edge to edge just with papers for my neutral background. All right, so this is basically what I have so far. So how do I start gluing? Well, basically, I see where I can see where there's obvious pieces that are at the base, and I start with those. So I will pull this one off, put glue on the back of it, place it down, and then take one by one and just glue it again and place them down. And then where I have spaces, I will add little pieces. So let me do all this gluing, and then I will come back and show you what it looks like. All right, so here I have everything glued down. Everything is fixed nicely and dried, and it looks great so far. I love these neutral colors. I think it's so interesting to look at already, and I haven't even started thinking about specifically about how my end pieces, my postcards and such are going to turn out. Now what I want to do next is I want to draw in my lines again. So this was my first pass, my first layer, if you will, of papers. But I want to go in and draw my lines so that I am reminded once again where my borders are. And then after that, I'm going to go and add more layers into the whole thing. So first let me get my postcards done. So that my postcards are going to be here. And then over here are going to be my ATCs, and I had them like this. All right, now what is next? Next, I want to add another layer, but before I add another layer of papers, I want to do a little bit of rubber stamping. So I want to add a little bit of color and very fine lines. So I looked for my stamps that have the line that are not too thick. I don't want to add really heavy, dark coloring. I just want to add a little bit of color. So I have this one, and then also this one. And with these ones, I'm looking to add movement into the layer. I want lines or things, you know, to kind of move your eye into different areas. Now, color, I think I want to just use a darker blue. I don't want it to stand out in contrast too much. I want it to kind of blend in. So I think I'm just going to use this nautical blue. You can also, of course, depending on the pieces that you choose, if say, for example, that you want to use something like this in your collage, you know, some roses or something that is going to be the piece that your focal point, then maybe you might think of choosing a color that would go with your focal points. I'm not quite sure what my focal points are going to be just yet. They might be kind of these vintage flowers. Already that looks very good. I also have these vintage trade cards, and I kind of like the idea of using some of these. So I'm not sure yet, and I think that a blue, a very neutral blue, would be fine. For sure it would look great with this one, but even with these I think it would be okay. So let me keep these on the side because they're already looking interesting. And I will start with this one. So I see some spots that I would like to have some of this blue. So here and possibly over here. So I'm just going to start here. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now what other papers do I want to add in here? Now is the time when I can do things like postage stamps. Also, another idea would be to put washi tape. I have this kind of pretty buildings on washi tape that might be good. So now is the time to just think about adding some really interesting layers here. Okay, so I have put on a few of these pieces of washi tape, just here and here, and here and here and here. Then I put on a bunch of postage stamps. So I plan to cut this down now, and I want to cut it down so that I can hold each individual piece in my hand, and it will be a little bit easier for me to figure out the placement of things. All right, so I've cut everything down and I'm ready to reveal to you how they have turned out. But first, if you've been enjoying this video so far, please do hit the like button so that it can spread to more people. Thank you very much. All right, so here is the upside down backside. This is what they look like. I have put a backing on some of these, and I have not put a backing on the postcards because sometimes I use them in these type of, I don't know, just kind of little cards that I send to people, and I want to be able to glue them on here if I want to. So that's why these are not finished. But let's start with the ATCs. So I have done some flowers on a couple of these. Well, actually I put flowers on all of these. Here is what they look like. This one is my favorite. I love that there is this little bit of pink ink in this paper at the back. What I had done with the paper was I had soaked it with a bunch of other papers, and the ink on another letter came off on this paper. So that transfer of that pink looks really nice with that focal point of the rose here. I've got stamps in all of these. This stamp is really cool, this Venezuela. It's just really crisp and neat, really neat. And it kind of goes with this figure in this statue over here. So that I liked as well. Now, what about the ink box cards? Here's how these ones turned out. This one I really like. It's got the cigarette card of this dragonfly, which is really cool. And I put this US postage, this orange stamp, which is a very unusual airmail stamp for the US. It's got this nice little postmark with 1937 on there. This is another really interesting stamp, so that I really like as well with this bird, and then these ones with the buildings on them as well. Now lastly, what about the postcards? Here are my postcards. They were placed like this. So this one also has the cigarettes card with the iceberg. And I wanted the blue washi tape at the bottom because I wanted to match with the blue here. So that is how that turned out. These two have the very vibrant vintage roses on here. And they also have, again, more of this little castles and architecture washi tape in the background, which is also pretty cool, I think. So now, what do you do with all these pieces? You do the work, you create the masterboard, you cut down all these things, you've got ATCs, you've got postcards, you've got inkbox cards or whatever else that you make. What do you do with them? So there's a couple of different kinds of projects or different kinds of things that you can do. I had already mentioned with the postcards that I'm not quite sure yet if I'm going to kind of mount some kind of cardstock on the back so that I can use it as a postcard and just send it right through the mail the way it is. I want to do that with at least one of these, and then the last one I will mount it onto something like a greeting card so that I can put it inside of an envelope. Now for the smaller ones, what do I do with them? So with the ATCs, I have a little collection of ATCs in this box. I love to create them. I love to make them and keep them. Sometimes I keep them for myself. Sometimes I mail them out to my artsy friends or participate in exchanges. things like that. At some point, I will be doing a exchange for ATCs in my membership. So when I do, I will announce it and let everybody know. So if you're interested in joining at that time to exchange these, you certainly can do that. Now, what about the Inkbox cards? In the past, I have done this little project where I did a whole masterboard of nothing but Inkbox cards. On a masterboard 12 by 12 paper, you can get 16 Inkbox cards. And I created 2 of these little books with 8 cards each and put a little binding here. I need to actually use a little bit more glue to make sure it really sticks well. It's just a piece of ribbon. And then I also used a little bit of Tyvek to hold these pages together. I think I made a separate video on how to do a little book like this. And there's no sewing involved, it's just gluing. I'll put the link to it in the description box. This is a great way to create a masterboard, cut it down into 16 little squares, and then create these cool little books that you can do things with. I also have this little holder. I had originally, or in the past, I had said that this is a good way to hold your Rolodex cards. Really, you can hold any kind of cards. I have regular ATCs, I have the Artist Trade coins in here, and then some of the Inkbox cards as well. So this is a fun little thing to have sitting on my desk or in my workspace where I can get some inspiration from previous work that I've done or from people who have also created art and have shared it with me in the past. So hopefully you can see that creating a masterboard is a great starting point for all different kinds of art projects. And hopefully you've got some ideas to use as a jumping off point so that you can go and create art that you want to exchange with other people or to keep for yourself. If you'd like to see some more examples of postcard art, then stick around and watch this video here.